According to the Fed, Americans are apparently on holiday, out to the beach, and just swimming in debt. Welcome to the Between the Lies podcast, your weekly lesson on how to approach an uncertain world with positivity and balance. I'm Nicky P, here with my good friends and money brains, Luke Tatum and Rob Brayton from Perfect Spiral Capital. Stick around to the end of the video for their free toolkit and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Gentlemen, got your towels?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of crazy to take a look at some of these numbers, and quite frankly, they're really unbelievable. We look, if just taking a quick look, $439 billion in a quarter is what the credit card debt increased. For reference, that's half of what all the credit card debt was in 2008. And, that ended great, right? So I don't know what you think, Luke.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Right, to your point, I'm looking at the chart too. It was just under $900 billion of total credit card debt back in 2008. And of course, it started to spike as the recession happened there, but and then tapered off or whatnot. But we've been way above those levels for a while now. What is it? We are now at $1.209 trillion in consumer credit card debt in the United States. And that is a big number. So what do people do about that?
What it says to me is clearly prices have been on the rise, right? We've seen this big increase in inflation. It ties into a lot of what we've talked about before. And what it tells me is we haven't overcome Parkinson's law. People are continuing to spend at their same levels, and it's just showing up in their home equity lines. It's showing up in their credit cards. And we can see that across all these different debt statistics. So I would say that seems to be what's really taking place is we haven't reined in spending to become a little bit more conservative, despite the fact of how expensive things are getting.
Sure. So another way of saying that is if you go to the grocery store, you buy exactly the same set of groceries every week or every 2 weeks or whatever you do, but the price of those things keeps going up and you don't make any more money, or you get a 2% raise, the inflation fighting annual increase on your salary or whatever, then you're fighting a losing battle right there. You have to make drastic changes. You either have to stop buying the things you want to buy, or you've got to make more money, or ideally both of those things, right? And so, but we're not doing that as a society, here in the United States. Like, it is a very, very vertical line when you're looking at this chart over time. Maybe we can even edit that into the episode or something and show it after the fact. It's like, it's not pretty to look at. So is this just then the average person is not, facing reality? Or is this the tariffs? Or, what do you is it everything? Is it one thing?
Well, let me pose the question, because we all could probably practice a little bit more austerity in our lives, but it's difficult. Well, here's a good question: what is the percentage of the modern Americans take home wages that home ownership housing takes up now versus 2008? So it's like there's only so much downsizing you can do, to make things work. Eventually, there's a bottom to the market. They only let home values get so low because that's where so many people have their value locked in. We've mentioned this before on the show, and maybe it's the old lefty in me that wants. It's like, well, hey man, we got a screwed up game here where no matter how hard we fight, the value of a house goes up, but I can't save enough to do that because I can't make enough money to buy a more expensive house. Or it's great that the stock market keeps going up, but all that means is everything's more expensive. It's over and over again. We keep getting pummeled with everything's more expensive, but nobody's paying more. They're still dealing with all the same crap. So, is it just a system designed to shit on the little guy?
I have a client story. I'll just kind of add to that. And so, of course, not naming any names or getting specifics, right? But I have a lot of people that I know in Texas. That's where we grew up and everything, my wife and I. And so a lot of connections in Texas. And Texas has no income tax, but they have property tax, right? And so what happens when inflation goes up? Well, everybody also thinks that they're getting richer at the same time because their property values are going up, right? The level of prices across the board are kind of floating upwards, and that applies to your property. And so you go, oh, wow, my house is worth a lot of money. Well, what happens when that happens? Well, the tax assessors want to get in there and reassess your property so they can raise your property taxes, right? And so people's mortgage payments are going up. You could afford it whenever you get that. But if your paycheck is buying less at the grocery store and your mortgage payment is going up, property gets reassessed, all these things happen to everybody all at the same time. And so I have someone who sold her house to get rid of the mortgage and downsize into a smaller property. She was able to do that, great that she was able to do that. Getting rid of that mortgage is a huge boon. But as you say, I mean, if you don't want to move hundreds and hundreds of miles to a different state with like a lower income or a different set of tax rules or something like that, you may not have that option. You may not be able to move that far. And so that just puts people in a pickle, one way of putting it.
One of the things across the internet right now is the joke about boomers and like the cliff that they're all headed towards, where their houses are all worth so much, but there's nobody to buy their houses when they're ready to downsize. Like, they're hitting that age where they don't want to deal with a big house. They just want the little place. But there's nobody to buy their home because all the millennials can't afford anything that big. Most of them aren't having families to fill those houses with anyways. So basically, you've got them all fighting over the same small properties. So the boomers end up getting the smaller properties. Then the millennials are priced out of the market entirely. Meanwhile, you have all the usual players we've talked about before purchasing up these properties for cash on the dollar, pennies on the dollar, and then renting them out to it's difficult. I guess difficult, is the Joe Everyman here to see this and see it as anything other than a game. Like, I think that was my first interest in the whole IBC thing. Is that like, well, here's a way to play with their rules as opposed to rules of the game, because it is a game. It's a game for them that they always win. They're always gonna win. And as long as you keep playing the game by their rules, you can't do anything but lose.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Nick. That that is part of it, is figuring out the game. It's seeing what's going on and then doing something about it. And I think that's the big challenge, is a lot of times people don't do anything about it. They'd rather just complain. Well, there is something that we can do at a micro you and me level, and that's start to play the same game on our own with what we have. And that can grow, that can expand, etc. There's the only limit to our own personal success is us. So it's, if we can take the time, we can educate ourselves, we can learn what people are doing, and we can apply that in our own sphere, we have an opportunity to make the right steps forward. Does that fix the monetary system? Does that fix, how expensive things are? Not necessarily, but it allows us to at least keep pace and keep moving in a positive direction, and hopefully be able to start instituting or maybe championing some change in our area, in our local economy. There's things that we can do on that front. So it's beginning to act first and foremost is important, but we have to, before we do that, we got to educate ourselves. And that's a big part about what we do here, is focus on education, helping people to learn and understand the game that's going on so they can do something about it.
Right. We've got a 5-step approach, right? And step 1 is take responsibility. And really and truly, you could say it's a 1-step process. Because if you take responsibility, if you actually go to where those, all the things that will come from you taking responsibility lead you to the truth. If you're relentless about taking responsibility for yourself, you'll get to where you need to go at some point. It might not be an easy path. You may have a lot of things you've got to figure out. I mean, it wasn't easy for me. Okay, but that's really what it's about, is taking back the control from these disinterested, callous third parties, where you're just a number, you're just a statistic, right? I mean, they don't care. The bank is going to lend you money to do something if it's a good deal for them. That's all. They don't care that you need to get a house. They don't care that you need to buy groceries, right? The organization can't care because the organization isn't a thing. It's only people. And those people, their paycheck, to your point, Nick, their paycheck depends on them sticking to a set of rules. They are not going to stick their neck out for Joe Everyman, right, to be able to feed his family.
Well, and it's funny, right? You have the credit score, right? All that is just hey, this person's a great moneymaker for the bank. That's what that score means. Of course I want lots of those people with a high credit score because they're going to use lots of money back to me.
Very specifically, it is a rating on your likelihood to pay them back. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah. How do banks make money?
Loans.
They make loans. Right.
In fact, what's a good way to make your credit score go bad?
Don't take loans.
Pay off your debt.
Pay everything off. Yeah.
Off.
Yep.
Yeah. You're a bad moneymaker if you don't owe them money.
And we wonder why, the U.S. has a debt-based economy and, we have a Federal Reserve System and all these things. It's like, the bankers won the battle for control over the U.S. economy. Like, this fight was over a long time ago.
Yep, 1913.
That's right. And so, can I time travel back to 1913 and stop the meeting on Jekyll Island? No, I can't. But, or, prior to 1913, what have you. But I can take control today, right? I can stop feeding those systems. I can educate myself and those around me. I can spread awareness, those sorts of things, of alternative systems. I think in the last episode, we talked about the public banking system and the private banking system, right? And so which one do you want to play in? The one that's run by probably some of the most evil people who've ever lived? I mean, I don't. That's not really interesting to me. Do I have a bank account? Sure.
I want to point something out here, in that we're having this conversation, and it's a little frustrating at times that even within, like, you'll say, the cash flow community, the people that want to teach you how important cash flow is, and more important than well, there's in a lot of ways those people are kind of, generally, I'd say, more on our side than not on our side. The frustration there is that even in their best approximations of how to play this game, it's still always about the debt. So it's like the real rule of thumb is, hey, it doesn't matter how your leg got broken, you still need to finish the race. And you want to finish it easier or harder.
And the thing that frustrates me about that, I'm glad you brought this up, is, everything is hunky-dory with banks and, like, using debt to finance rental properties, to do X and Y, all the stuff that we're told is great ways to make money, right? It's all fine until all of a sudden it isn't, right? You have one thing go wrong and then all of a sudden it's not that easy to get those things done. You're in a bad spot and it may ruin your life if you're following like a Robert Kiyosaki playbook or something, right? And you're just getting started. When you get to a certain point and you've got tons and tons and tons of diversified assets across multiple states and maybe multiple countries, and you own multiple businesses and all these things, maybe it's not that big of a deal. You can localize your losses and move on. It still hurts, but maybe it's not the end of the world. But you've got to get to that point. If I've got $10,000 a year to try to make something happen, and I'm just getting started. I just got a huge promotion. I want to take advantage of this and cash flow into something that can change my life long term. The same rules does not apply to that person that applies to Robert Kiyosaki, or whoever. I'm not picking on him because his books are great.
I was just going to say, Luke, like the whole concept of leverage, like there's nothing wrong with that concept. And I think using it in the right way is fine. The problem is who's the owner of, ultimately the owner of the asset, because if somebody else owns all that debt, so to speak, and that's your primary cash flow source, they control it. And when we think about control, if we're giving up that control by leveraging that third party, all it takes is that one thing. And, looking at the Fed data from New York and starting to see a lot of these delinquency rates, 90 days delinquency rates increase since 2022 in virtually all areas. It isn't, all it's going to take is one of those to like start to spike. Then you're going to see a tremendous pullback in credit. And that's where things start to get scary for people. So, I mean, it just kind of ties into where you were going with that.
No, perfectly. And I mean, I don't have savings rate data in front of me and stuff, but like I always like to look at the savings rate and see, how much people are actually able to live above what they need to survive and, put away, right? Because when we talk about capital accumulation, we talk about the actual wealth of the world or of the US or whatever, you've got to have savings. You've got to be able to build assets. You have to have stuff. you have to build the factory or whatever. There's things that must occur. Everything in the world can't be leveraged because then there's nothing there, right? It's a paper trail that just burns right up. It's just gone as soon as anything goes awry. And so looking at that debt chart that from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, I mean, it is just crazy. Total consumer debt in the U.S. now is over $18 trillion. So, but I mean, we're talking about credit cards to start. Credit card debt being over $1 trillion, that's not really a good thing either. It's all bad when it comes to that. And this just shows like people need to buy stuff. They still need to buy stuff. They still need to put food on the table. They still need to do all this. Savings rate is not good. I don't know what the number is.
4.4. I actually just checked from the St. Louis Fed.
There you go. That is not great.
No,
that is not great. And so, what does that tell you? I'd rather put this on a 27% credit card, and of course you don't look at what that actually means over time, right? 40-something% of those people are carrying a balance is what the chart shows. 46% carried a balance at least once in the last year. That is a lot. You carry a balance for 1 month. That is a lot of money. And so that is just the desperate straits that we're in. And that's kind of how you pitched this episode to me, Rob, was to say, hey, the economy, we're being told left and right, the economy is doing great and rah, current administration, whatever. But are we just putting a Band-Aid over some things here? Like, that's not a good sign.
Yeah. When you think about it, and, I would just challenge anybody, like what Luke was talking about earlier, to really do some education and dig in and understand our monetary system. But when you start to really look at it and you really go back in history and then you look at where we're at today, sadly, a lot of this is on purpose. And I know doesn't feel good, but it is by design, and it's a way to siphon off wealth from the average person and put it into the banking system. And I know that sounds terrible, but that is how our money system, that's how our nation is structured at the moment. And the only way that it changes is if there's a large enough contingent of people that are willing to work and operate outside of that system. And that's a lot of what we do within the infinite banking community, is help to put people in a position where we're operating outside of that system because we're operating in a 100% reserve system. And when we do that, and you get enough people, you can actually start to put real pressure onto these people that make a lot of these decisions. And I know it would be extremely painful for people But if you truly wanted to see a dramatic shift and a dramatic change in your personal situation, there's pain there that has to happen in order for it to actually get better. And what I mean by that is you actually have to cut the money supply, and things have to decrease in price as a result. And that period of time it takes for that to happen that's the hard part. But if you're properly capitalized, if you have set yourself up to be able to go through that, you're going to be in that much better situation to be able to make it happen. And that's part of the process of what we're here to do and help educate people to do.
So paint me the picture. Paint me a rosier picture. Paint me what the world looks like for the opt-out.
Yeah, shoot. So opting out of the system, right? Like, first of all, it is possible, to Rob's point. You can, I mean, again, I have a checking account. I have a savings account. We do keep money in a bank, a regular old bank. Okay. But you have the ability to accumulate your wealth, warehouse your wealth in a different location. It does not have to be in this public banking system. You can use 100% reserve banking, which is insurance, the insurance world. And that probably, I mean, make your eyes roll back in your head. It's just the most boring sounding thing in the world. But I used to think that too. And here I am, So the insurance world is totally accounted for, up and down, left and right, everywhere. They've got their ducks in a row. And these companies are, 100+ year histories of paying dividends to their shareholders consistently, or I should say policy owners, not shareholders. And it's incredible. It's incredible that your wealth is increasing every single day just because you are alive again the next day. You didn't die in your sleep. Congratulations, And it's awesome. And it gets at a better and better rate over time. And you can deploy that on your terms, your repayment schedule, however you want to do that for, anything. A bank would tell you no for some crazy investment idea you have. It doesn't matter. You're not asking a bank. You're asking a life insurance company, and they're required by contract to say yes. So it's good stuff. I mean, Rob, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I'll say, personally speaking, like I've implemented this process and it's paying dividends. Figuratively and literally, right? We have so much more control over our finances than what we did before. And I mean, myself personally, my savings rate went from give or take 8-ish%, which, shockingly, I was much better than the average, but we went from about 8% to 35% in the space of 2.5 years. So like it is possible. And it sounds crazy. If you would have told me that that's how it would have been for us, I would have said you're nuts. Like for real. I would have said you're crazy. But the fact that we're able to do it and do it in such a short amount of time is amazing because of what it will do for us, my children, my grandchildren, all that, right? And everybody has that opportunity, or at least the vast majority, especially if you're disciplined, like you can make this happen.
Yeah, almost everybody. It'd be better to pursue and find out that there's some reason you can't than to just go, oh, that's for rich people. And the whole point is that it's not for rich people.
It's at the you and me level. That's what Nelson structured it as.
Rock on. Well, it's about that time, gentlemen. Why don't you take us out of here?
Yeah, you bet. So thanks again, as always, everyone, for joining us on this week's episode of the Between the Lies podcast. If you watch this full episode, then you're definitely interested in the future of money. We've got a free toolkit to help you demystify the future of your money. Head on over to perfectspiralcapital.com/podcast or click the link in the description and grab your free toolkit today. That's going to have a copy of my book and all kinds of other resources just waiting for you. Thanks so much for watching.